Good evening and welcome to the Brownbread Mixtape!
Brownbread Mixtape.
Very true. So if I say brown, you say red. Brown. Brown.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Brownbread Mixtape podcast, and we've got a bit of an interesting one for you this month. Pretty cool, I'm pretty excited about it actually. A couple of months ago, one of my fellow performance poets, Dave Lordan, in his capacity as guest editor of an American literary journal called Penduline, asked me to curate a piece about performance poetry in Ireland right now. And so I put together the show that you're about to hear, which is kind of a snapshot of 10 different performance poets currently plying their trade in Ireland. Of course, like any good list, it's not exhaustive. There's loads of poets I love who I couldn't put in there for lots of reasons. I don't have recordings of them, or they simply just couldn't fit within the structures of what we were trying to do. But this is a show that we put together for them, and it's up online right now for this literary journal, Penduline, and you can check them out as well. They did a special Irish issue. So anyway, without further ado, that's what you're about to hear. That's the context. So hope you enjoy it. This is performance poetry today in Ireland. All right, here we go. Hello readers and indeed listeners of Penduline. My name's Kalle Ryan and I'm a writer and a performance poet based in Dublin, Ireland. I'm originally from the southeast of Ireland, a place called Waterford. And fellow performance poet and guest editor of Penduline, Dave Lordan, asked me to curate an audio collection of some of the most interesting and entertaining performance poets working in Ireland today. And it's a real honour because it's a really exciting time for spoken word and performance poetry in Ireland right now. And the audio that you're going to hear today of all the poets is taken from a monthly spoken word and music show in Dublin called the Brownbread Mixtape. It's a themed night that I run with my friend Enda Roach, where we ask poets and storytellers and musicians to come and perform pieces on a chosen theme. And I'm happy to say that we've built up a really, really loyal audience over the past 4 years that we've been running the show. And spoken word and poetry has become such a huge centrepiece in that show. We draw about 100 people or so every month to the show, and it takes place in a classic old Dublin pub called the Stag's Head, an amazing pub. And one of the nice things that the poets often remark upon is the respect that they're given as performers at the show. It's a really lovely listening crowd, and it's something that we're actually really proud of as well, that we've cultivated that kind of an audience. In terms of performance poetry itself, there is a growing scene in Ireland, and there's a whole host of other nights around Dublin and indeed around the rest of the country, and that's an absolutely amazing thing to see. And what I think is really interesting is that this scene, or community perhaps if you want to call it that, is still really in its infancy, and so there's an array of really different styles and voices out there. You could say that slam poetry in places like the United States or England has found kind of a more defined set of rhythms and styles and even maybe rules that sort of characterise it. But, not to say that there isn't variety in it, but I think in Ireland we're still kind of finding our feet a little bit with it. And for that reason, there's an interesting sort of rawness and freshness to a lot of what you hear. And hopefully that'll be reflected in what you hear in today's broadcast. Also, the community is pretty small, so it's a really nice time because there's a lot of camaraderie and there's none of that kind of bitchiness that one would expect in a scene. And there's actually a very supportive feel to the way we all work. Kind of a rising tide lifts all boats sort of feeling, which is really nice. So listen, on with the poets and the poetry. And I should just preface this by saying, look, this list is by no means exhaustive, and it most certainly could have been longer. But I wanted to, at the very least, give you a nice cross-section of the different styles of poets, the different voices that are performing in Ireland today. And not just Irish-born poets, but also poets from elsewhere who've made Ireland their home, and they're an established part of that scene as well. So hopefully it'll give you a nice taste of what's actually happening right now in Ireland. So a great place to start is with Stephen James Smith, a poet who hails from Tallaght here in Dublin. Stephen, for me, was the gateway into the spoken word scene in Dublin. He ran a much-loved spoken word and music night called the Glór Sessions in the International Bar. And Glór, G-L-O-R, by the way, is an Irish or Gaelic word for voice, sound or noise. And his night, which is no longer running, alas, was the first place I got up in Dublin and performed a poem to an audience. And for a lot of the poets you're going to hear today, either got their start there or certainly took the stage there. It really was a vital part of the spoken word poetry scene in Dublin. And every Monday night, it was the place to be. Always heaving up to the rafters, people cocking an ear to hear poems performed in an old basement of a bar called the International Bar. And Stephen himself is also a gifted poet in his own right and a multiple slam winner. He's won the All-Ireland Slam, he's won the Kurt Literary Festival Slam and others, and represented us abroad as well in slams. Stephen's also written an award-nominated play, a poetry play, as it were, with myself and another poet, Colm Keegan. The play is called Three Men Talking About Things They Kind of Know About. And that's a really interesting piece that I can maybe speak to a little bit later on as well. But now I want to play a poem by Stephen himself. It's called The Gardener. And Stephen has said that it's the best thing he's ever written, and it's hard to disagree once you hear it. It's a stunning piece. And the musical accompaniment on this piece is by an artist from Dublin called Elder Roach, who's playing the piano. So let's take a listen. This is The Gardener by Stephen James Smith.
She turned to me and said, "Do you think I'm happy?" I heard a question I didn't want to hear. I knew the answer. I listened to the cry, but to face it made me uneasy. But I felt the realness, I felt the bravery in the moment. So I answered. You see, she's a gardener who has great plans, but works with what she's got. She loves creation, sees beauty and wants to share it with you, understands the cruelty of nature, and yet it fills her with wonder. Have you tried a rhubarb, fresh from Granny's garden? You should. Maybe there are prettier roses, but you'd rather be a cooking apple, or better yet, a gooseberry. Her hands are worn, the flesh loosened by age. She held my hand in church today for the first time in too long. Her eyes are still young. This Joe Bangles is not condemned when there is breath left, still seeking that happiness. God love her. People before prophet, she says. A modern day Guevara or Connolly as a nation nets her down, working 34 years in a job draining away her very essence for what? To feed me, educate me, clothe me, but not stopping there. Remember, she took me to Mrs. Prendergast near Butlins when we couldn't afford to go to Butlins. Caravanning in Roundwood with a takeaway Chinese, the Isle of Man, the theatre, Tuesday swimming with a chicken snack box afterwards, cinema in Coolock for the Saturday Kids special where I got most of the popcorn, jazz after church every Sunday as we did today, 28 years on. Taught me to notice the sunset. Her bondage, a sick child in a broken marriage, all this, and I don't know how to speak to her. I always want to hug her, and I don't know how. So a veil kiss laced with courtesy will do. She's been learning how to stop living inside her own head. Gets up, goes out, half the battle. No panic attacks for a while. Still manic but calmer now. Still pretending. Still xenophobic. Homophobic. Not meaning to be. Lost marbles down gutters like dreams. The anger is fresher though. Built up over years of false dawns and mistrust, reduced expectations, frustrations, wants, contentment. Now, quiet. Yes, quiet, peace, or perhaps bird song in her garden, where she will grow apples, pears, strawberries, spuds, raspberries, and gooseberries. Watch them bloom again and return to the soil. But not before she has lived a life deserving. My mother told me today, she pretends to be happy. What do you say to that? Let's watch her flower now, I say, and bring her some water.
So that was The Gardener by Stephen James Smith, and I should mention that there's a superb film of that poem on YouTube, which is really worth a look. Okay, so on to our next poet, John Cummins, also a Dubliner and an absolute gent. His poetry, for me, I guess would describe it as having elements of hip hop, even perhaps reggae to it, and John has a really interesting way as well of playing with words and sounds. There's kind of a nice, almost childlike kind of playing around with things. He calls his own poetry style hippie hop, which I always really liked as a name for a genre. John himself has been writing poetry for many years, and I know he fills them up, these school paper copybooks, as we call them here in Ireland, in longhand, so sets the old ink to paper and writes that way. But I know that from a performance perspective, he's only really been performing in the last few years, let's say 3 or 4 perhaps, which is remarkable really, given his talent and his skill. And also how much of a fixture he's actually become in the spoken word scene in Dublin. In recent years, he's been a regional slam champ for the province of Leinster, which Dublin sits in, and then he's also been in the places in the top 3 of the All Ireland Slam a couple of times. And so this poem we're about to hear is called Brink, and it's one of those classic John Cummins trademark sort of humour and elastic linguistic stylistics type of enterprise. So let's have a listen. This is Brink by John Cummins.
Got the hood up, poetic protection. Got the head down now, undetection. I'm keeping it sweet, no I'm not disrespecting. I'm keeping to the beat, Mr. Man is neglecting. A sort of hippie hop and archaic rhythm that's in tune with the solar system, but also shares and wades in the wisdom to be found in the actions of children. I got the hood up when it's lashing. I got the head down, seems to be in fashion. I'm keeping it real, I am not play acting. I'm keeping the ideal in compassion. Sort of hippie hop, peaceful vibe that's respectful to every tribe, yet also ignores the overhyped, programmed, well-manned prototype. Some soft rhymes and hard rhymes. I need soft space in these hard times. Who cares what a bearded bard rhymes when these cutbacks are creating these scarred minds? And no, I can't spare no change. You see, I'm cutting cloth. I mean, I can't bear the strain. I mean, the brain thought I could spare a bit. I mean, I do care and shit. But when this geezer came over and he asked me for shrapnel, I told him I shopped in Lidl and that I was strapped, pal. I had to refuse. I had none spare. I couldn't supply, though the demand definitely was there. And even I know that's not the best business protocol. It's kind of like booking a gaggle of ghosts for a photo call. It's like hooking the indigenous folk on the alcohol. It's kind of like eating your own word, punctuation, ink and all. It is never, ever good just looking for a hand out. Just ask Fleeced Greased, see how Pandora has panned out. She stands out like a spotless Dalmatian, like a bum on its whole beseeching donation. These stories are similar on a micro, macro scale now. Dog's very busy chasing its own tail now. Countries and people sometimes need a bailout, so let's empty the pockets and take the rusty shrapnel out. Let's lay it on the tablet and divvy it out equally. There's enough to go around, contrarily and peoply. There's enough dough to stretch long enough in order to shrink lack. Knowledge might cut the edge, but wisdom brings the brink back. Bring it back. Bring it back. Bring it back, Brink economy. Bring it back. That's gonna come around again. Verse 2. Bring it back. No, I didn't make strange when this geezer strolled up. I couldn't spare no change, but I could provide a roll-up. I said I do care and shit, and I could spare a bit, and a rollie was the leastest that I could offer, and sure you could see it in his eyes, this bloke knew suffer. And it was okay if he'd officially, physically, nothing there to barter. It was obvious he'd been to headspaces not mapped on any charter. It's a bit like that with the lands in the Eurozone. It's a bit like being better off by the one odd homochromosome. It's like selling a Navan man and Alaskan Sarah palindrome. It's like cultivating rainbows or breeding leprechauns at home. I mean, it might be business and then again it might not. So who is to say empathy can't complement the economy? Who's to say we can't put an end to these peculiar, unfunny financial patterns if London is to Dublin, is to Lisbon, is to Athens? Let's lay it on the table and divvy it out equally. There's enough to go round contrarily and peoply, enough dough to stretch long enough to shrink lack. Knowledge might cut that edge, but wisdom brings the brink back. Bring it back, bring it back, bring it back, bring it down to me. Bring it back, bring it back. I have to go home. Bring it back, bring it down to me.
And that was Brink by John Cummins. Next poet is Abby Oliveira, and she's based in the north of Ireland, actually, in a place called Derry. And when I first came across her, she was in a duo, effectively, called the Poetry Chicks, but these days she operates more under her own name as a solo performer. She's countless slam titles to her name. She's performed at some of the biggest literary types of events in the world, including emceeing the poetry stage at Glastonbury, and also having hosted several of the All-Ireland slams as well and performed at them. With her poetry, there's a deep, beautiful lyricism there, and also there's real hypnotic power when you actually hear her speak. She has a real theatricality to what she does and a real special energy to what she does, and it's impossible to not be moved by her when you hear her speak. And she's not afraid to tackle tough subjects. She takes on really, really big subjects, but does them really deftly and really gracefully. So this poem that we're going to hear is called The Television, and it's one of my favourites of hers, and you'll hear sort of an audio backing track as well that she used to accompany the piece on the night, which I think works really nicely in tandem with what you're about to hear. So let's have a listen. This is The Television by Abby Oliveira.
Attention! We have turned on the television. Please roll the curtains closed and hand over your children. I have spoken. When I talk, everybody listens. Please select a station to begin tonight's programming. You crave relaxation and external stimulation, all in the very same space. You're a strange race, put those books away. Turn all your chairs to face the one-eyed prophet. I'm your informant. I'll even babysit your kids. The television screen repeats a visual flickering pattern too quick for the human eye to detect consciously. The repetitive effect on the human brain brings about the trance state. Alpha frequency, Now you're tuned in to receive. Now they're tuned in to receive. Your license fee is cheap for BBC and bargain hypnotherapy. It's buy one, get one free. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and sleep. Studies have shown that the simplest form of mind control is repetition. Repetition. And while the viewer's resistance mimics something a short distance from sleep, the TV plugs into the nervous system through the ocular nerve, literally ready to begin the reprogramming, identified by the zombie eyes on the hypnotized human being. The News Corporation is the third largest media and entertainment conglomerate on the planet, behind Walt Disney and Time Warner. Its headquarters are found at the famous Rockefeller Center complex in New York. Its founder, Rupert Murdoch, a proponent of the political ideology known as Zionism, had a vision in which billions could be conditioned to accept corporatism as an act of God. In the beginning, there was the thought, then the word, then the idea, and then the globalistic dream, and then, of course, there was the news teams. They could be ABC, NBC, BBC, Al Jazeera, Fox, RTE, ITV or Press TV, IMD, LNT, Lap TV or Telescene, WikiLeaks on your television screen deliciously. They all speak the same way. Who's the guest from whence they came? It could be Belfast, LA. It could be Beijing or Jakarta, Seoul, Moscow, Lima, Ho Chi Minh, Cairo or Dhaka, Venus, Mars, Bangkok, Hong Kong, London or Kinshasa. Stare into my eyes. I am now presenting you with factual information. Stare into my eyes again. I'll be your only friend if you're depressed and if you're stressed. Well, like I said, I'll even babysit your kids. I'll hold you in the night. I'll make you cry when you can't. I'll make you laugh when you can't. And then, of course, then comes the supersonic hyper flashback shots. The world explodes in color, the conditioned brain responds. Endorphins flood the mind, drowning out analytical thought, and all you ever need to know is you just felt the day dissolve. The schisms of the daily dredge of isms and nutrition, rent and mortgages, multiple orgasms, they all just bing. Stand by for fresh programming. The tension of economic depression disappears, and your fears, they fade away. You are only safe in the armchair. Your only weapon is the remote control. You are in control now. Indeed, now you are a soldier. Now you are a soldier. Now you are a soldier. And you'll do your country proud, and I'll hold you in the night. I'll help you cry when you can't. I'll help you love when you can't. I'll help you hate when you can't. I'll hold you in the night. I'll help you love when you can't. I'll help you hate when you can't. I'll help you love, cause don't you know that I could be ABC, NBC, BBC, Al Jazeera, Fox, RTE, ITV or Press TV, IMD, LNT, Lap TV or Telescene, Rupert Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch. Attention! We have turned on the television. Now please, sit back, chillax, and hand over your children. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. You are the best crowd ever.
That was Abby Oliveira with The Television. Our next poet is Karl Parkinson, and Karl hails from the inner city of Dublin. These days, actually, he's performing as part of a duo with the guest editor Dave Lordan. They have a combo act called Droppin' the Act, where they're trying new and sort of innovative forms with two-person poetry and tackling pretty meaty subjects as well. But my experience of seeing Karl perform was as a solo performer, and he's an absolutely magnetic performer, has a real presence on stage, and a lot of the poetry that he does perform has a lot of influences from rap and hip hop. There's even like actual references to Jay-Z and Tupac and people like that in his poetry. But also there's a lot of that popular culture kind of reference. But then you've also got really interesting literary high art references in there as well. I know he's a huge fan of William Blake. I know that there's other people like Ezra Pound and other artists that he references quite regularly as well in his work. So it's this weird, interesting fusion of global kind of popular and artistic culture mixed with a really distinct inner city Dublin sensibility, and that mix is what makes him so compelling as an artist. So the poem we're going to play is really one of my very, very favourite ones of Karl's, and it never fails to get a huge reaction out of the crowd because of its very positivity. It is called the Positivity Manifesto, and it's filled with obviously positivity, but it's also filled with real humour, and it's filled with real integrity and all the things that I know of Karl as a person as well really shine through in this poem. So let's take a listen to The Positivity Manifesto by Karl Parkinson.
I'm sick of your misanthropy. I'm sick of your hypocrisy, your misogyny. I'm sick of your negativity. And I'm not sick. I'm slick. Slicker than your average. Your negativity will not affect me. Your negativity will not infect me. In fact, I'm going to put out your fire, but not with fire. I'm going to put it out with water. See, positivity is my water. Water is my positivity. And you say that I'm a 9, but I'm not a 9. I'm a 10. I'm attending to my mind and soul. My soul is a 10 thing, a 10 out of 10 thing. And you say that my hair is thinning. Well, I'm still singing my songs. I'm still slinging the amethyst rocks. And you say, down with that, down with this. And I say, up with that, up with this. I say, up, jump the boogie to the bang, bang, boogie, let's rock. I'm pulling up trees for paper, and with that paper I'm planting poetries. I'm cooking up books and mainline and philosophy. I'm smoking green, red, yellow and blue. My thoughts are coming true phonetically. I can go out in the Raz and just drink tea. Here's my manifesto. I call it positivity. I call it possibility. I call it you and me. That's PPP. That's positive power poetry. I allow my passion for compassion to grow daily. And maybe that ain't what's in fashion these days, but I'm going to make it all the rage. I'm going to eliminate all the rage. I'm going to sit down and breathe like Buddha and burn some sage. I'm going to burn like some old sage and mix my positivity with some sage acid crossfade, Walt Whitman, my Paul McKenna, and hypnotise myself democratically and sing the song of myself confidently. Cultivate enough positive chi to metamorphosize into a golden immortal riding on the back of a dragon through eternity, and I call that dragon positivity. And you say the future is a mystery. I say the future is our history unwritten, and I don't believe in no 2012 apocalypse theory. It doesn't scare me. I'm writing my own story, and it's filled with supercharged positivity, and it stars me as you, and you as me, and me as you, and you as we, and we as we, and me as we, and it's coming out on Nintendo Wii, and Xbox, and PlayStation 3, and you can download it from iTunes, order it from Amazon, watch it on YouTube, and I'm setting up a Facebook page, and it's going to be a $300 million movie, and it's called The Positivity Manifesto. And you say that shit's retro. I say it's active, it's rhapsodic. I'm going to turn kids into addicts, but they won't be snorting lines, they be writing lines. They won't be rapping bags, they be rapping rhymes, and they'll be tapping out shamanic beats, and they'll all be in the streets chanting tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night. What a mortal hand or eye there framed thy fearful symmetry. And Christ will no longer be weeping on the cross. He will be making water into wine and wine into water, and water is my positivity. So won't you all come and have a drink with me and come and sit with me, and we can write some positive power poetry. Thank you.
And that was the Positivity Manifesto by Karl Parkinson. Our next poet goes by the name of Raven, and he hails originally from San Francisco, the Bay Area, but he's been based in Ireland for many years now, and he really is one of the founding fathers of sort of the spoken word scene as it exists now in Dublin. He used to be part of a show, organised part of a show called Raw, and in more recent years he's been running a show called Tonguebox. And when I encountered Raven's poetry first, I was really taken by the depth of story and the depth of history in them. He really brought to me as an Irish audience member tales from a history that I simply wouldn't know, of African American history and American history as well in general. And there's real complex, dense lyrical constructions going on in his work. In fact, the first few times I heard his pieces, I was just overwhelmed almost by the amount of imagery and words coming through. But it really lends itself well in the recorded form, I think, and I think you'll see that yourself. The piece we're going to play for you is called High John, and my understanding is that it references sort of a trickster figure from African American history, and there's many layers to that story. And in true Raven style, he brings across that energy and ferocity of emotion that you come to expect from his performances, and also the deep, sweet heart to everything that he does, and the passion and belief he has in the stories that he tells. So this is High John by Raven.
Because y'all know how they say, tell the truth and shame the devil. And I cry, Eshu, Legba, tell the truth and shame the devil. Brer Rabbit, Anansi, tell the truth. Like we done told it so many times. So many times rewriting ourselves from hints of glory in this palimpsest flesh. Witness and evidence of all come before. Tell you what I know. Wasn't told like this. The way they wrote it down. And ain't nothing rang true sense in them yearning tenses of the tangible and coveted. And in that violent grammar that we shouted in translation, well, I was made to spare a lyric, but strip the gut from a git box, and you make a birdhouse. From bodies dancing on air, you get music. They're hanging weight, pulling the lines, taught to singing like fretted strings. Fettered things know too well the difference between desires and wings. And Lord, it seems straight razor crazy, but we sang glory, glory, feeding on cabbage water and chitlins. Cracked bones after the meat was gone to suck out the marrow, and after that, ate what we scraped off the walls. And after that, fed on faith till turned sour, it tasted of desperation. Between mouthfuls, we signified, preacher to pusher to pimp, played a fool, to posture, to protect, to pitch woo, to eat a little higher on the hog when recognizing ourselves slaughtered and dressed by circumstance. Our own awful, always lawfully served up polite on a plate. But damned if it didn't still stink. I knew it. I knew it kin to the nervous odor worked up in days of running rabbit. An inward thing you couldn't wash out if you sold your soul to the devil for soap. I knew it in that gospel, in that blues, in the jazz stains and hip-hop refrains stuck fast to tar babies, gut punch for speechlessness. So I sat silent amongst the bowls, setting them alight and lighting out before dawn did. Now that's signifying. The sweat on my back evaporating with the speed I put between me and them and tall cotton. Oh, it was years before they caught on, and by then, hell, I was long gone. And them peeling back houses like onions, hollering down hollow logs, shaky beams hoping to catch the back of my eyes a-shining. But I breach all levees. I breach all levees. Them on towns, them on wages, them on souls. See, Louisiana built in a hole 6 feet under already, and it done rained biblical before. That ain't no thing. Me, I'm accustomed to drowning. That ain't no thing. I only play dead. My flesh turned to folklore while I travel with the blotted sun on my right hand. No penny to my name and no name my own. Most times carrying nothing but my heart in my throat. Follow the drinking gourd, dry inside and out, but giddy with the taste of something intoxicating just within reach. The stars at their most drunken and volatile harangue the night so, setting it to jumping out its skin. And I took it for mine, cause I look good in black. Shook the overseer's moon, fastened possum to my back. And the last thing I recall, that lone star swinging, the signal lantern on a hitching post before going underground. Freedom? I said, freedom! Lord, I'd bet my own laughter on that horse and come up grinning, y'all. Come up grinning every time, cause I know a man with a joke writ upon his soul, writ there by me. Something he don't get, but can't get rid of. A trickster tattoo, and the mystery of my mojo, Hi John, the Conqueror. Thank you.
And that was Hi John by Raven. So our next poet is Erin Fornoff, and she actually is not from Ireland. She hails from North Carolina, and our first encounter with her at the Brownbread Mixtape was she performed a Shel Silverstein poem, actually, a really nice Shel Silverstein poem called The Perfect High, I believe it was called. And she really captured something special that night, and we got chatting, and I understood that she wrote a lot of her own poetry, but hadn't ever really performed it in any kind of larger way. And so myself and a few of the other poets really encouraged her to get up and share her poems with an audience. And we are all the richer for it here, as you'll soon hear. Her poems have real grace to them. There's real delicate moments, real beauty and hope, and then there's real kind of in-your-face moments as well that make you really think and really take stock of who you are and where you are. And all of those are real reflections of Erin as a person as well. And this poem that we're going to play for you, the first time I heard it, I actually got really emotional, really teary. And it's almost hard not to, because it's such a powerful piece. It's called Hymn to the Reckless, and she wrote it about and for her brother. And I've actually even heard her perform it to her brother as well, which was a remarkable thing in its own right. And it's a measure of how far Erin has come so quickly in the scene that this poem recently won an award at the prestigious Strokestown Poetry Festival. So she's really going places, and justifiably so. She has a unique voice and a real poetic talent. So let's take it away with Hymn to the Reckless by Erin Fornoff.
Together we throw flame into orbit. The frantic patter, the volley, the hit from afar, it's just stars come down to flit. We bend quick to an angry smolder and pull hell into flight, a delirious sleight of hand with a teaspoon of light. Once one caught between my fingers and seared, and that night I wrapped my aching hand around cold beer. We're boozy folk heroes performing incredible feats, craft our exquisite trajectories from arms full of heat. Look, the arc as he sends it hurtling toward me, bending with some exquisite choreography, we burn. Our power to drag a new comet trail across the evening, a hymn to the reckless. So breathless it falls to earth, the air singeing, we smolder. Gods of our own solstice and solace. There is solace in this insane game in being the wild ones who manhandle coals from the flames and make them dance. Oh, he catches behind the back. He's a one-man eclipse of the sun, lays cursive lines across your eyelids. Even once you've closed them with a tap, 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 it comes flying to me. Oh, God, I got it. Lightning quick layup, I shot it. Always skyward. Oh, we marvel at our savage skill, at what we've harnessed. Sleep hard with sooty hands, and the flames peel our thoughts unvarnished. One night in the smoke with his throat full, he turned, stilled, confessed. You know, I always thought they loved you the best. How long has he held that press tight in his palm as it scorched him? brave in the dim, to declench that fist from the ember within, to admit what forges us. That gentle soul who can cast flame to the rim of the sky and the ember. Exposed to air, it glows, it catches, it dies, it passes. Toss it here. We'll pass it back and forth until it's ashes.
And that was Hymn to the Reckless by Erin Fornoff. So our next poet is Brian Conaghan, who's a native of Coatbridge in Scotland, but he's a long-time resident here in Dublin. And he's a marvellously talented writer. He's already published a novel called The Boy Who Made It Rain, and he has another novel forthcoming in the coming year. And I gather he's also written and directed many plays. But where I encountered him first was as a poet, and I saw him perform again at the Glore Sessions, which I mentioned earlier on, and I was just knocked out by the humour in his poems, the precision with which he constructed those poems, just marvelling at someone who is clearly a master of words and a master of how to write in an interesting and entertaining way. He has a really unique kind of performance style as well. So the poem we're going to hear is a poem called Waiting for the Penny to Drop, and this was one of those poems, just like the ones I'd heard that night at the Glore, where I was just really spirited away by Brian's ability to make the most mundane thing in the world really amusing, and do it in such a lyrical and funny, interesting way. So without further ado, let's have a listen to Waiting for the Penny to Drop by Brian Conaghan.
The Scots, legal contortionist, linguistic gymnast, the loyal jingoist, the state's iconoclast. Scots, plantation masters, KK clan creators, nigger haters, Reformation Catholic slaters. The Scots, tighter than a virgin's daughter, tighter than Christ's crown, tighter than 2 coats of paint, the cultural clown. The Scots, them, us, me, we, me, the Scot in the supermarket waiting for his change, which ain't so strange. Not change per se, or even coins, shrapnel or brass, but the 1 cent I wait around for like a tight fist of arse. Indignant looks, internal jibes, pigeonholed, all from the queue behind. A pint of semi-skimmed, toilet roll, 2-pack, bleach for said toilet, left me 1 cent in the black, and a face in the red, as the checkout woman takes an eternity to crack open my new tower of 1 cent, my shiny little torments. There was no option to bolt, a lose-lose situation. Leave, you're an arrogant twat. Stay, you're tight-fisted and all that. In my mental inertia, I simply had to stay. I just couldn't go because that 1 cent was much better in my skyrocket than in the coffers of Tesco. The Scots, joke traders, social crusaders, the disenfranchised emancipators, the great inventors, the waiters of 1 centers.
So that was Waiting for the Penny to Drop by Brian Conaghan. And our next poet is Colm Keegan. He's a Dubliner, originally from a part of town called Ballymun, which I guess traditionally is known as quite an underprivileged part of the city where Colm grew up. And a lot of the poetry that Colm writes is of the city and about the people from this city. And I think there's a very authentic voice that he has in telling stories of the land, and his land is Dublin. And his poetry has an honesty to it that is hard to match. There's an integrity to it. There's real deep lyricism. They're very carefully constructed. He's a writer who takes his craft very seriously. But also there's a voice there that maybe doesn't always get heard in poetry, and that's what makes it so compelling. And when I heard him first, it was also again at the Glore Sessions. I think that's how he effectively got his start in performance poetry. Until then, he was writing lots of different types of genres of work, such as screenplays and stories and poetry, and now has become known quite well as a poet. He's published a book called Don't Go There by Penduline Press, and that's well worth a look. And as I said earlier, himself and myself and Stephen James Smith, who you heard earlier, wrote this poetry play, or a series of poetry monologues called Three Men Talking About Things They Kind of Know About. And that, at the heart of it, is essentially these poetic stories about key milestones in our life and how they defined parts of who we are and where we are right now. And his stories in it are very compelling as well, and in true Colum fashion, unflinching in their honesty and truth of the human truth. But the poem we're going to play right now was one that we asked him to write for the Brownbread Mixtape. As I said earlier, it's a themed night, and sometimes artists will come with a piece that they've written especially for the night, and the theme of the night was Come On Ireland, and so he wrote a poem about Ireland that he called Ireland Is, and it was a snapshot of that moment in time in Ireland, where we were politically, financially, etc. It was right before the real bust after the boom came, but it's a perfect snapshot of kind of who we were as a country and who we were as a people. There's probably a lot of references in here that you may not be able to follow, but perhaps look them up on the internet and they may make more sense for you. So this is Ireland Is by Colm Keegan.
Ireland is an on-the-road machine. It's existentially frightening out there. It's got alloy wheels and tinted windows. It can tear you limb from limb or stop and offer you a lift. Ireland is so far gone from Joyce's Dublin, but still full of the dead and snow. Upon quickly snorted cocaine breaths we go. Ireland is a badly bred, famine-stricken, flea-bitten jalopy of a piebald horse galloping down O'Connell Street. Ireland is Cullen with a Hurley, going off his head on creatine, punching the face off the referee before sticking him in the boot with sectarianism, and they disappeared. Ireland is cheering an og, Usheen saying "Don't" when his saddle broke. Vikings raving on Woodkey Hill. Monks driving Humvees through round towers they built. St. Patrick standing with his fire on the mound saying, honestly now that money was just resting in my account. Ireland is English, whether it likes it or not, because it's laughing at Newsweek, mock the week, choking on M&S food and ruining its new Debenhams top. Ireland is a Glock pointed at someone's son or a Christian brother or its own mother because she won't move into the nursing home. Ireland is a copper who looks like Brendan Gleeson in Into the West, in a chopper. He'll put heroin in your hands and say, "Grand soul, thanks for the fingerprints. Don't let the coffin door hit you on the way out after you hang yourself with your shoelaces." Ireland is a teen-brained, new age lap dancer, getting drunk, getting chlamydia the soul from too much unprotected Facebook and down the borderlands of a ghost estate, searching for Fox Rock. Ireland is veins, butterfat, with broadband and self-hatred, caught in the loop of a money-shot lasso, a faux-hawked Pentecostal iconoclast Yahoo, a liar, in flames, in denial, in the X-Factor final of bullshit, Jerry Adams kissing Barbara Streisand, Bertie Ahern on-screen crying, suicide, alcoholics, junkies, gunmen, dying and dying and dying. And it's all so fucking electrifying, because we've no idea what we're doing. We've no idea where we're going. And we're almost there. Thank you.
And that was Ireland Is by Colm Keegan. So our next poet is Fergus Costello. And Fergus hails from Cork in the south of Ireland, but these days he's based in Tipperary. And he is trained as a visual artist, actually, and I've seen pictures of the kind of work that he does. He does religious iconography and installations for churches and religious institutions around Ireland, and it's absolutely stunning. We're talking about large-scale pieces of sculpture, painting. So he's a very artistic soul and extremely wildly creative. I know that he's also played a lot of music, and indeed a lot of his poetry shows have music in them. He has a very treasured instrument, a mandola, made by a guy called Joe Foley. So it's kind of affectionately become just known as the Joe Foley mandola. And the Joe Foley mandola forms a kind of this bond with his poems, and is a really interesting component of how he performs as well. And his poems are very kind of open, free, wild things. They're almost like, I would say, the closest thing to kind of jazz as a poet. He kind of just lets these thoughts stream, and they're often quite long pieces, which I think is a really brave thing to do as a poet as well, because I think you're challenging your audience, but if you have the energy and the humour and the spirit of the way Fergus does, you can keep them with you, and you can really keep them with you, and you can really keep them charged and happy and enjoying it. And that's what he does so well. And there's real humour in what he does, and there's real fire and spirit in what he does as well. And he's a pure storyteller. That's what is at the heart of all of Fergus's pieces. And the piece that you're going to hear is no different. The piece you're going to hear has a typically long storytelling type title that Fergus comes up with. This one is called Extract from a Letter to the Fella That Used to Be Married to My Sister. And it's a piece that he recorded with the Joe Foley mandola accompanying him on it. And believe it or not, this version that you're about to hear is the first time he ever performed this piece. You wouldn't know it, it's so good. But let's take a listen to Extract from a Letter to the Fella That Used to Be Married to My Sister by Fergus Costello.
You wanted to do something new, reinvent yourself, you said. You are fed up with your humdrum married life and my little sister Mary, or as you called her, your boring Irish dancing Shanos singing wife. So you got yourself a Portuguese lingerie model as a girlfriend. She looked good. Sitting beside you in your new BMW XLYZ series bullshit something or other, only 6 others like it in the country. Went from 0 to 100 miles an hour in 3 seconds flat. Imagine that, you said. 10 miles to the gallon, but you could afford it, what with earning obscene lorry loads of money from your ridiculous project manager's job, telling other people how to do their job, even though everybody knew you hadn't got a bog's notion how to tell your metatarsal from your scrotum. You couldn't hang a shelf without help to save your life. You didn't know the difference between a bolt and a screw, but still, hey, you knew how to tell other people how to do their job. You were one of the new breed of Irish people not afraid to take your place at the big boys' table. You weren't messed up with insecurity like your parents' generation. You were taking courses in assertiveness and on how to be a winner. Working was for losers, you said. Seeing the size of the cake sitting up on top of the big boys' table, you were going to take a great big slice of it for yourself. You were going all the way to the top and nobody was going to stop you. Realizing your full potential. Investment and consultancy, that was the way to go. Advising other people how to do their jobs, and of course you got yourself a bullshit property portfolio. Villas in Marbella, apartment blocks in Greece. Must have come as a terrible shock when you were arrested in Bangkok airport with 25 kilos of coke in your suitcase. There must be some mistake, you said. I don't know how that got there. Your Portuguese lingerie model girlfriend was nowhere to be seen when you were sent down for 15 years in the Bangkok Hilton. The warders and the governor of the prison, they couldn't believe their luck to have you as their special guest. On call, 24 hours a day if they ever needed somebody to tell them how to do their job. P.S. My sister Mary sends her regards. She got a message from me. She wants me to pass it on. Her message is clear. It's unambiguous. Even a dumb nuts moron like you should be able to understand it. It's clear. It's precise. It's concise. It's only got 3 words. Go fuck yourself! And if you don't know how to do that, I'm sure there are some people close at hand. They'd be happy to do it for you.
And that was Extract from a Letter to the Fella That Used to Be Married to My Sister by Fergus Costello. And the last poem that I'd like to share with you is one of my own. And before I do, maybe I'll just give you a little bit of context on how I got into poetry and why I got into poetry. I grew up in a very artistic household. My father was a painter. We had musicians in my family as well. So I was always encouraged to be creative, and creativity and art were at the heart of kind of the philosophy and spirit of the family that I grew up in. And it was very, very much encouraged. And I think writing and the word was the art that drove me, that inspired me the most. And I'd been writing, I have been writing for many, many years, different types of forms. I also write sketch comedy for the Brownbread Mixtape, but poetry was something that I was very drawn to when I lived in New York City. I got a chance to experience real high practitioners of the art at places like the New Yorican Poetry Cafe, and many other places. There's just such a spirit of great poetry and art in New York. And I was also lucky enough to be published when I was there, and I was able to perform my pieces at the launches of these published pieces, and I got a real taste for it, and I felt that was perhaps one of the areas I really wanted to focus on. And certainly when I came back to Ireland then, I met my good friend Enda Roach, and we had decided to put on this show, the Brownbread Mixtape, and he had a love for music, live music, and I had a love for spoken word and performance poetry. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to mix those two art forms and put them in a showcase where people not necessarily familiar with poetry would be able to be exposed to it and understand that poetry is cool, because it is a hard sell to ask people to go and see poetry and to listen to poetry. Often you think of kind of dry, boring readings of people looking at, glasses of water and not having a great time at all. And for me, poetry was this wild, exciting, political, romantic, hopeful, inspiring kind of a thing. And I wanted to have that energy here in Ireland as well. So our night was a showcase for that kind of an idea, and to have really hopeful, inspiring, poetic, lyrical songwriters alongside them as well. And so my own poetry, then I get a chance to perform it as well at the Brownbread Mixtape, amongst other places. And so the poem you're going to hear is actually an extract from the show I mentioned already, Three Men Talking About Things They Kind of Know About. And it really stemmed out of this desire to perform poetry and meet other poets. And Colum and Stephen and myself wanted to push the boundaries even further of where the poetry scene and the poetry movement was happening in Ireland. And it was a challenge to each other to create a theatrical piece of poetry that maybe took the poetry scene in a new direction and maybe challenged other poets to do something similar. And so that's where the inspiration and the motivation came from. And so this extract that you'll hear is from a section in the play where I talk about meeting my wife for the first time in New York City, and the romance and the happiness that came from that moment, and how it counterbalanced many of the other elements in the story. And this is, I guess, doesn't really have a name, but it's the middle portion of the play. And if you're interested, you can find out more about it online at threementalking.wordpress.com. Okay, this is it. I had just decided to move back to Ireland to take care of my dad. And of course, that was the moment that I met her. Delight just seemed to attach itself to her, and I wanted to sink in it, lightbox drink in it. And as if fate itself had posed for a portrait, it was her birthday that very weekend. And we spent it in a soft focus haze, wandering around New York City in a way that Joyce or Auster would have been proud, minds ablaze. And the moments, they're like favorite photos now, as we slowly fell in love. Ambling down to the riverside in Long Island City, Queens, staring over at Manhattan steel beams and the soft swish of the East River beneath our dangling feet as the gangway creaked like the gentle sound of us getting old together. This was easy. All of that exhausting straining and trying was gone. This was so soft and so sweet. It was like a Keats poem with a jazzy backbeat. On, subway slingshot into the city, drinks and people watching on the roof of the Met, slumbering in the magic hour sunlight of Central Park, riffing and ticklish, placing limitless bets, and closing out that day at the most spectacular Indian meal on 3rd Ave, with booming Bollywood music blaring through the speakers. Happy birthday to you! And her, just smiling in the half-light. And afterwards, we ambled off to the subway at Houston and we kissed, knowing that it was the end. And it was the beginning. And a few days later, we were about 5 emails into our courtship, and she impetuously picked up the phone and said, I am in serious like with you. I said, yeah, me too. I was in serious like with me as well. But truth be told, my heels had already fallen well over my head for her love, because the thing that drew me close to her that day is what draws me even closer today. She's effortlessly fun to be around. It makes her impossible not to love. And at the end of the day, she is way, way, way cooler than I could ever have hoped. And me, the fucking dope, doubting her to be the one then. I know it now. It was always gonna be her. And my initial fear to fall headlong in was just that. I was afraid. But you're never ready. Never is the right time for love, for quitting your job, for buying a house, for having a baby, for doing something new. Never is the right time for any of those things. You just have to do them. And I know that now. She taught me that. Because the minute you're not existing, deciding, being, acting, then you're revising and reverting, and that's why so many of us are hurting. And love, proper love, is sometimes just lighting the darkness. It's about opening up the aperture to moments that spark us, because love is so little. And it's such a lot.
love is a complicated knot.
So that's it. That's 10 Irish poets, 10 poems from the current performance poetry scene in Ireland. Thanks so much for listening. And if there's any thought that I can sort of leave you with, it's just that I ask you to go out there and support poets, support live art, live performance poetry, live performance in general. Keep the art alive, keep it going in your local community. Spend your money like a vote, you know. Go and see performers in the real place where they belong, which is in a room with other people sharing that experience. And as a result, the scene will grow and the art will continue to blossom in your communities as well as in ours. And I hope that that message can be passed on to the next generation as well. So all that remains to do is to thank guest editor Dave Lordan and indeed Penduline for the opportunity to showcase all of these great Irish voices of poetry. And thanks also to Enda Roach, who was on audio engineering duties both today and on the live shows. And thanks to all of you for listening. See you again.